When I started this course, I felt pretty confident in my background knowledge regarding multicultural issues. I've taken courses in cultural education, I've taught in China, I've completed an English language learning endorsement, I've taught in low income and diverse school settings, and I've watched several films and documentaries and read books to learn more about the experiences of minority groups. So I felt like I was pretty knowledgeable coming in. However, this has been one of the most life-changing courses for me, specifically in terms of understanding my own subgroups better. Those are groups of white, English-speaking, and upper middle class background, and understanding how that has impacted my relationships, how I work with families and students, and really just how I experience the world. So I'm excited to unpack that a little more. The first course objective that I feel like I achieved was evaluating personal beliefs and professional experience related to multicultural gifted education issues. So, as I said, I felt pretty confident in my understanding of multicultural matters. But starting the second week when we watched Frances Kendall's talk at UGA, I started questioning some of my own personal beliefs. Kendall was a white woman raised in a wealthy family who's Christian, which is exactly what my upbringing was as well. So I automatically resonated with her and appreciated the points that she made about advocacy. But then once we read her chapters from her book, Understanding White Privilege, I was so struck by a certain area because Kendall had moved away from her family, became passionate about getting involved in diversity issues, but one day was at the YMCA with women of color and they told her, you need to figure out your own whiteness and like go away for a time and don't come back until you've done that. And when I read that, I was so struck because I realized I've spent it was for me, I guess since I started college, so about 8 years, maybe even 10 years. I've spent the last 10 years trying to work as an advocate and learn more about multicultural matters, but I've not taken time to evaluate my own beliefs, especially the ones that are deep rooted. And so I had to stop and say, what is my whiteness? What does that mean? How has it impacted my life? And if you see here, there's this picture of a mountain and a hot air balloon. I found it on Teaching Tolerance's website. And the way it's drawn, the eye kind of goes to the hot air balloon, and this person's going to the top of the mountain. And it's actually a little bit harder to even see that there's people having to climb up the mountain to try to get to the top. And hopefully they'll get there, but you don't know. And I feel like in my evaluation, I really realized that this is like my life. I've thought that I've worked hard and earned every achievement or job that I've gotten, but now I can see because of my whiteness, because of my upper middle class upbringing, I was given opportunities that just kind of let me fly or soar to the top easily. So understanding that really is helping me understand how this works in my classroom and what I need to do to pay attention to students who might feel like they're climbing up a mountain, especially in terms of systemic oppression. Another part of this evaluating my personal beliefs has been trying to figure out my racial identity. That was kind of the work I chose to focus on this semester. Because the more and more I was reading about white privilege and all of these issues surrounding multicultural matters, I just kind of grew angry and wanted to disassociate from my race because I was ashamed of it, and I'm ashamed of all of the oppression that's been done to minority groups. But luckily, Howard and his writings were encouraging and helpful in this process. Howard wrote about white dominance and talked about how whites came to privilege through this notion of being right, specifically in the Christianity movement. And reading about that was actually kind of therapeutic for me because it completely aligned with my upbringing and the messages of, we are right because we follow this set of values and it's been twisted to achieve dominance, unfortunately, in this society. So being able to name that has kind of been helpful. And then his chapter about coming to terms with white identity was so healing for me, because he says you can't just be angry or disassociate. You need to come to terms with your white identity. And one way he suggested doing that was connecting more with your ethnic heritage to gain a better racial identity. So that made me think back to the My Peeps assignment and think about how can I explore more of my heritage in order to gain a more positive racial identity. Because I really think developing that will help me as a teacher model, like, what does it mean to be a healthy white person who is confident and appreciates their identity, but also still does have righteous anger and works as an advocate for those who do not fit within the dominant group, either racially, socioeconomically, or linguistically. I've also been able to just look at how all of these personal issues have impacted my professional experience, and I have had to admit that there are so many instances where I viewed students from deficit perspectives, and I think I did have disparate impact because of that. And it's been in different settings, like linguistically or racially or economically. So now that I've identified that, I really want to be more aware of it and be intentional to incorporate more multicultural components in my curriculum and in my teaching. And I really need to continue researching how to best connect with these students and their families. So this alone has been very transformative. The next course objective that I met was recognizing prejudice and oppressive institutional structures in education that marginalize gifted students from culturally diverse backgrounds. Again, I thought I had strong background knowledge on this, but I feel like this course has provided so many concrete examples of systemic oppression that has just perpetuated white dominance. Wells and Cerna's discussion about local elites was one that really comes to mind, about how money and white flight continue to impact detracking efforts. And I feel like being able to have that knowledge is really going to help me as I talk to people and have courageous conversations about that type of issue. Another specific issue that was powerful for me was learning about the lack of minority teachers. I did not know that 85% of teachers are white females. So again, having statistics like that, I feel like can help me validate things that I'm talking about when I have these conversations. The talk about expectations with gender and with race and language, all of that is helpful. And finally, the last helpful thing in helping me recognize this was Wiley's breakdown of superdiversity, when he talked about specifically how whites essentially took over the Native American culture, and learning about things like the Nationalization Act, the Civilization Fund Act, and the nativism movement. I've not heard about those before, which is crazy, because I feel like all I've learned about is the Trail of Tears. But learning about those and being able to point and say exactly what happened, again, I feel like just strengthens my talking points for courageous conversations. So I feel so much more knowledgeable, and I'm so grateful, and I'm hoping that it can continue. This knowledge will continue to heighten my sensitivity to oppressive structures in my school and in my district, and I just hope that I can constantly stay aware of them. My future plans, now that I have finished this course, there has been a change. I'm very Midwestern, which means I don't like conflict, and the thought of talking about multicultural matters before just terrified me. I would just be prone to bite my tongue if those types of issues came up. But now, after learning from Singleton and Hayes, I really want to start more courageous conversations and keep coming back to them. It was so helpful when they talked about moving away from just your feeling and going into the thinking realm. That way it won't feel quite as scary or hard to facilitate these conversations. And I really appreciated that they talked about just continually coming back and knowing that some people may never change, but it's definitely a worthy cause. So that's one thing I'm planning to do, starting with a few of my colleagues. And then I did have a reaffirmation of a future plan. Since starting this program, I've become very passionate about advocacy, specifically at a policy and legislative level. So I'm really wanting to start doing this. The more I was reading about multicultural matters, I was like, okay, there have got to be policy changes in my district. So I want to get going with that, working with my district, and potentially I would love to move to a state level, helping with advocacy efforts and legislative efforts there. So those are some of the things I'm thinking about. My networking is going to start with my district's GATE coordinator. Our district has a pretty small gifted program just because California, it's not mandated and it's not well funded. And she's kind of like a one-woman show. So I want to connect with her and talk about Ford's equity formula, talk about more equitable identification measures, and maybe even talk about early childhood talent development opportunities to try to help develop our program. I also want to connect with the California Association for the Gifted, not just giving money to them, but working more with informing people around the state. I want to connect with other educators who are passionate about this, and I want to help advocate with policies and laws with them. In closing, I wanted to just connect this to a concept I've heard Dr. Ford speak on in multiple settings, and it's the concept of windows, doors, and mirrors. And I really feel like this course for me has given each of these. With the window, it's offered views of worlds that are real and familiar or totally strange to me. It's been good to see different perspectives and be able to witness what's going on. This course has opened up a door of opportunities to explore regarding multicultural issues, multicultural curriculum. It's been really great to feel like I have opportunities ahead of me in this field. And lastly, but not least, this course has been a mirror for me. It's reflected the human experience. It's helped me see my own life and feel connected and celebrated. And it really just makes me want to provide this for all of my students in my classroom, no matter their race, their language, or their socioeconomic background. So that's it. Thank you.